Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm back in Wisconsin. I was born and raised in Green Bay. Left in the early 1960s and began my search a long time ago. And we used to have real winter in Wisconsin. And some of you that are older remember real winter. Consistently, February was 20 to 30 below zero all month long. 30, 40 mile an hour winds. So things are changing. So I come to speak to you about Zen. And that's a bad idea. Because Zen isn't about talking. Zen is also not about talking, or not about talking. So Zen, the word Zen, it's wonderful, it's exotic. They now have perfume called Zen, games called Zen, and business practices that they sell to rich executives called Zen in the Art of Business. So this word Zen is becoming popularized in our culture. And the word Zen is how the Japanese say the word Chan. And the word Chan is how the Chinese say the word Dhyan, or Dhyana. And what that word means is meditative awareness, pure meditative consciousness. So the word points to the state. And Zen is all about being in that state of mind, in that state of consciousness. So Zen, why bother? So you've all come here with inquiring minds, and some maybe have come thinking that you've come because you've heard about Zen and you're wondering what that's about. And superficially speaking, that's true. But at a deeper level, like the moth is drawn to the flame, we are drawn to a deeper truth. Something's still missing, or we wouldn't be here gathered. So Zen is one possible way of coming to a realization, fulfillment, and awakening. And it's about practice. It's about practicing the perfection of silence. It's about practicing the perfection of compassionate awareness. It's about practicing openness, clarity, wisdom. So I'd like to start with a short practice period. And in Zen practice, we're not so much concerned with what's going on in your mind. Sometimes when you sit, there'll be a lot of fantasy or struggle or confusion. But all of that is content. And in Zen, we'd like to have you simply drop a little deeper into your mind, into pure stillness and openness. And whatever arises, arises, and then it goes away. Your attitude this morning is not your attitude this afternoon. A moment of frustration or pain or confusion, and then it's gone. And then something else, and it's gone. But we're usually not aware of the deeper quality of mind or the deeper quality of consciousness. So in Zen, we ask that you simply become silent, empty out. Let go of everything. Just be present and awake, with no view or opinion, no resistance, no fear, no hesitation. Just a loosening of the grip of your ego and opening into a little deeper awareness. And if you can do that, or as you do that, you develop an understanding of, oh, this is what Zen is about. It's about the experience of deep, pure, receptive consciousness. It's not about the story or the appreciation of that, or the understanding of it. It's about the state itself. So who remembers the psalm in the Christian tradition that goes like this? Be still and know that I am God. Do you remember that? Which number was that? 42? Nobody remembers? Okay, well, we'll say it's 42 for the moment. So what I'll do is start this meditation practice by repeating that, and in the sort of Zen way, take a word or two away and repeat it again and again. So shift your posture a little and find a comfortable place where you can sit perfectly still. And you want to let your breath be soft and deep. Right? And you want to have your eyes softly open. Blink them when you need to. Right? And with each inhalation, see if you can move a little deeper into yourself, into the silence in the center of your being. Each exhalation, softening, opening. Each inhalation, gathering and being a little more centered, a little deeper into yourself, a little quieter within. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know. Be still. Be. apologize for interrupting your meditation. I'm always tempted to just sit. And some of the old, better Zen teachers would do that. They would come for a public talk and people would all come in and they'd sit down. Start looking at the watch, it's my God. Then you ding and leave, right? So for me, sitting now, I have difficulty because I no longer relate to time as a chronological event. So I don't know literally how long we've sat there, which is interesting. So usually I need a watch. And now my watch, which is a very sophisticated Casio that speaks several languages, has decided to not keep time correctly. So I don't know in any case how long we were sitting here. So you notice, some of you perhaps have had a meditation practice, but you notice how when you sit down and you start to become still, you become neurotic. How interesting. Maybe normally you're not very neurotic, but when you sit down and just try to be still, you start going twitch, twitch, and it's like mind starts to rush around and it's like, oh, oh. And you don't drop into the timeless. You don't enter into stillness. So instead, what happens is you get distracted and irritated, perhaps. It's like, oh, this doesn't work, I can't do this, or get caught up again in the mechanics of your mind. Get caught with feeling, thought, and confusion. And you don't know who you are. Right? So you sit down because you don't know who you are. So who are you? Deep, pure, lucid mind. Deep, pure, lucid mind is who you really are. And then temporarily and superficially, a body, a mind, all of this stuff going on. But not knowing who you are. Not knowing who we are, we wander around in some confused story. And then we finally come to a degree of frustration or confusion, or in our tradition we say pain. Our ignorance becomes loud enough to be recognized as pain, and we start looking for an answer. And so I looked in my Judeo-Christian tradition for about a decade, and unfortunately did not meet Thomas Merton or someone who could guide me. So I turned to the East, looking for a possible way to come to that resolution or that understanding or that depth, and discovered Zen. How remarkable. It was a faith-based religious tradition without the insistence on a deity, which solved my dilemma. Because I had a lot of confusion around deity mysticism and faith-based religions. I found it difficult for me to, through supplication and prayer, achieve a degree of insight that would take me deep enough to discover the truth, the deeper truth of my own being, my own consciousness, spirit, soul, or self. Turned to the East and found Zen. Zen said, sit down, shut up, erect your spine, open your eyes, and follow breath after breath. Be still and know who you are. Be still and know the divinity within yourself. And stay there and get back to me when you know who you are. But I'm having all this trouble with my emotional body. We'll deal with that later. Get back to the meditation hall. Oh, but I have all these philosophical questions. Later. First, wake up and tell me who you are. Wonderful. So I found this path to be quite efficient and remarkable. And over time, I've grown to know myself a bit deeper than just my thoughts or just my feelings or my desires or fears. There are three things that prevent a Western person, such as myself, from coming to pacification of mind or deep satisfaction and realization of the truth, deeper truth. One is no experience of it. I have never tasted the truth of my own soul or my own spirit. That's a huge problem. Because if I don't know who I am, I'm lost. So we say that you must, through your own inquiry, come to a taste, come to an experience, a revelation, a realization, an epiphany. We say an insight, sight in rather than sight out. Not an idea, but an actual epiphany or experience of your own spiritual essence. That must be done for you to come to pacification or satisfaction, spiritually speaking, and even intellectually spiritually speaking. So, you must awaken a little. That's easy. You just have to put in the time. It's like the wonderful joke, cab driver. Fellow waves down a cab. The cab stops and opens the window. The fellow leans in and says, "Quick, cabbie, how do I get to Carnegie Hall?" And the cabbie goes, "That's easy, practice." So if you want to know yourself, practice self-inquiry. If you want to know who you are, look within yourself long enough and consistent enough and deep enough until you go, "Oh, this is what they've been talking about in all of the traditions." So the form for that is simple. Sit down, become perfectly still, look within, deepen and soften the breath, and breath after breath, keep looking within. Don't look without, don't look away. That's the total instruction. And keep doing that until you look deep enough through your own egocentric structures, and you'll come to that deeper truth. Guaranteed, we give it to you in writing. We can't say when. Depends on how serious you are and how willing you are to face yourself in every way, to face yourself completely in absolute honesty and openness. The second problem is philosophical. The first problem is we do not have the experience, and the second is we tell a story that prevents it. So if I ask you, "Who are you?" I will get many, many different answers. So in Zen training, in the school I'm trained in, we ask these questions deliberately to find out where a so-called student or a person lives, where we live in our story about who we are. And we live through our story. The story that I tell you about my life is where I live. All of my experiences, my fears, my interpretations, my passions, this is the story that I tell. And it's where I live. It's how I'm experiencing things. So, if I say, "Who are you?" how do you respond? From where do you respond? From what depth within you do you respond? If the statement that you take, if I say from the deepest place within you, "Tell me, who are you?" does your mind quickly go to purity, openness, consciousness? Or does your mind go to some story about, I'm a mother, I'm a politician, right? I'm a thief, I'm a fool, right? I'm wounded, I'm a seeker. Right? Do we tell all these different stories, or do we stand in the truth of who are you at the deepest place? Pure receptive consciousness. Consciousness herself, itself. Right? So do I drop into that place? Do I drop into this deep purity? Take this seat. If I do that, then philosophically speaking, and neuro-linguistically speaking, I abide in the center of things. Oh, but there's so much pain and confusion I'm living in here. Well, okay, that's an interesting place to be, but what about the truth of the deeper place within you? What about the truth of the deeper qualities of your own spirit? Is it possible that you are pure, deep consciousness? Is it possible that right now you are that consciousness? Not something you must become later, but right now, can you see? Can you hear? Can you think? If you can see, and you can hear, and you can think, and you can feel, you're conscious. But do you identify with the consciousness as primarily who you are? Or do you identify with the story about the interactions? So, if we're telling the story, and if we're coming from a place of story, particularly wounded story, confused story, right? We're caught in this perpetual myth of interpretation, of story, the myth of ego, going on and on. So we say, no, take your seat. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? So, take your seat as spirit. Take your seat as soul. Take your seat as consciousness. Right? Take that seat in the center of your own consciousness. Claim that space and live from there. Right? Then the next question is, well, what's it like if you're there? If you were awake and you could hear and you could see and you could smell and taste and you were in that center, right? There's no problem, right, living from that place of openness or purity. Not denying what's going on, but realigning yourself and speaking a deeper truth, being in a deeper place. The third problem, or the third difficulty, is confusion about the nature of our emotional body. We become confused about the very nature of our emotions, and we interpret emotion as being who we are. We identify with the emotion and drag it around, as opposed to seeing and understanding an emotion as a process of informing. So about the same time as the historical person, the Buddha Siddhartha Gautama, there was a Taoist, Lao Tzu, and I really love his view. And he has something to say that I would like to share. And this is one of his poems. The ancient masters were profound and subtle. Their wisdom was unfathomable. There is no way to describe it. All we can describe is their appearance. They were careful as someone crossing an iced-over stream, alert as a warrior in enemy territory, courteous as a guest, fluid as melting ice, shapeable as a block of wood, receptive as a valley, clear as a glass of water. Do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? The master doesn't seek fulfillment, not seeking, not expecting. She is present and can welcome all things. That for me is a description of this deep mind. That's a description of the state of Zen. So if I were awake, that might be how it would be. Another way, if I were awake, things might be. These are instructions. Empty your mind of all thoughts. Let your heart be at peace. Watch the turmoil of beings, but contemplate their return. Each separate being in the universe returns to the common source. Returning to the source is serenity. If you don't realize the source, you stumble in confusion and sorrow. When you realize where you come from, you naturally become tolerant, disinterested, amused, kind-hearted as a grandmother, dignified as a king. Immersed in the wonder of the Tao, you can deal with whatever life brings you, and when death comes, you are ready. So the third problem, the first again being we have no experience of deep mind or spirit or soul or whatever term we want to use about the essence of our being. We don't have that experience. So we must gain that experience to come to satisfaction, traditionally speaking. The second is philosophically, we deny it in the story that we tell. I'm this or I'm that, but I don't include that depth or that story. I don't ever speak from there. I speak only from my temporary egocentric conditions and circumstances. And the third is a confusion about the nature of emotion. I become attached to my emotional body, and the noise level in that attachment, or the identification with that attachment, prevents me from entering into the deeper silence. If I relate to my emotional body in that way, things can happen like disassociation or denial, subconscious suppression of feeling, and it creates a level of noise that I can't get through to get to the deeper clarity and quality of mind. Because I don't understand emotion as being, primary intention of emotion is to inform, not to be attached to and contracted and held. Emotion is designed to inform me, to allow me to understand something, to change behavior, do something in my life. So from this point of view, emotion is not a burden. Emotion is not problematic. Anger does not mean act out and be violent. Fear doesn't mean shut down and run away. Anger means something important is going on. Fear means what's going on. So if I take my cultural interpretation and condition a way to deal with feeling, I create a level of confusion and distortion that prevents me from deepening in stillness. Because that coloration and that attachment to the emotional body becomes problematic. So I identify with those feelings. I get confused about the very nature of feeling, and I live in a disturbed mind or disturbed environment. So those three problems. One, no understanding of who I am. I have not been willing to enter the silence. I have not been willing to go deep enough within myself to find out who I am. The second, I tell a story that denies it. So by changing the story that includes the possibility of this depth, I'm a body, there's a mind, there are senses, there's an ego which is a self-referencing part of sensing. It contains all kinds of evaluated views, and all of those are experienced in a purity that's deeper than them. It's not changed or influenced, cut, burnt, wounded. And I am that purity. I am that deep purity. Very different story than, well, who are you? Well, now they call me Jumpo and I'm this Zen guy, right? I'm getting older and I've got a nerve problem, I've got a spur in my neck, you know. Right? And I'm starting to have memory problems now. What's going on? I'm getting older, you know. That whole story without, who am I? I'm pure receptive consciousness observing this mystery and magic of life unfolding. So if I abide there, it's like, oh, then suddenly things can open, coming to that deeper place. So if we deal with those three issues, one, find a practice. Get deep enough into the practice to get a taste of this deep consciousness. Two, change your mind. Stop telling a foolish story based upon cultural presentation. Right? Investigate. Find a deeper place to tell or speak from. Right? And third, clean up your attachment and confusion around your emotional body. Those three things attended to will clear the air for you. So at this time, I'd like to open it up for questions about any of the strange things I might have just said.
Could you talk just a little bit louder? I'm a little bit hard of hearing.
Okay. So are there any questions so far for clarification or deeper understanding or of what I said about the three things? First of all, the lack of insight based on not going there. The second being that the story that we tell blocks our growth and our development and our maturity. And then the third, that the confusion about the emotional body creates a high level of noise that also prevents a deepening of the insight. Yes?
Why don't you expand on the issue of the confusion of the emotional body? Speak more about the confusion of the emotional body, what one does about that and so forth.
I'll speak to how I came to it and how I look at it a bit differently. As I continued to deepen in my meditative practice and discipline, I came to see my mind in a very different way. In classical Buddhist thought, which is the foundation for the Zen schools, they say that the mind, the relative mind, the thinking mind, and the cognitive mind, is a bunch of heaps or activities. And they say that the mind is empty, and then in the emptiness of the mind, there are piles of stuff, or heaps, or activities. And one is smelling, one is tasting, one is touching, feeling, seeing, and then they say thinking and feeling are also just one of those activities of mind, just like smelling and tasting and touching. That feeling and thinking are just like that. They're a sense mechanism. Right? And the ego kind of puts those in a special category. And in deep meditation, it became clear and evident to me that from this place of clarity, that when feeling arose, it arose as like a color or as a sound. So what I discovered was like, and we do this, we'll say, well, anger, what color is anger?
Red.
Red. So I saw anger and it was like red, 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 and I wasn't angry. It was like I felt the emotion arise, but I wasn't angry. And it was like shocking. It was like, well, anger is a sensation. It's something that's arising. And it isn't for me to get mad and jump up and down. That's emoting. The pure feeling doesn't mean that I have to jump up and down and make noise. I saw it as information. So it's like, wow, I'm no longer subject to emotional blackmail or promiscuity. I don't have to be drug around. And the next question that came was, where did I learn that? I mean, that I had to act out. So I saw that emotion was opportunity, that emotion was just wonderful, and I wanted strong emotions, but I was not forced to behave in any particular way, because I saw the emotion as being information. Now, it took decades to sort out the difference between survival reactions in emotion, such as fear, run, somebody's going to jump out of the tree and eat me, and fear of another nature, which is like, I'm afraid that someone's going to dislike me or leave the talk, whatever. And that those are two very different fears. And the one, because of its animal nature, is just built in. The second is like a copy of that, but it's just dumb. And I learned it from my parents and their parents and their parents. So then I thought, well, where did this all start? So I thought about it for a couple years, and I think about 60,000 years ago is when this confusion about emotion really got going. It was like, you know, fear means duck and hide because somebody started seeing that pattern. And it used to be fear was tied to something real. Then it was like, well, I'll duck and hide because of something else that wasn't real, right? And those got confused. And because of the nature of the animal instinctual survival, that set it up. But we've evolved beyond that. We're thinking rational beings now. So if we can change our understanding of feeling, it's like, wow, feeling is big, colorful input and information. But it doesn't mean that I have to react in any particular way. And then I observe my own behavior is that some things would make me angry if I was tired or irritable, and then 2 hours later the same thing would not. So I just saw clearly as well that, well, I'm actually choosing my responses. And so I'm creating my emotional body moment by moment based on patterns I call hysterical patterns. And that I didn't have to be that way, that I could be a free being and have wonderful feelings arise, but not act out of confusion. And in that, seeing that then aligned up the classical interpretation of why the teaching about the activity of mind, or the skandhas, or the heaps or functions of mind, what that teaching meant. Enough?
In your practice, have you ever observed an individual who tried to get to that first element, the element of peace,
Yes.
and really worked at it but never arrived?
All the time. And that's why we don't have the time. But at some other time, if you want, I'll come back and do about an hour and 20-minute process of taking you through the whole ego interruption process to allow a level of insight and to then reestablish language around that, which there are, again, the philosophical block prevents it. If I'm sitting, Zen meditation breaks into 3 simultaneous practice phases. The first is concentration. The Sanskrit word is dharana, where you gather yourself. You go, enough BS, thank you very much. I'm going to gather myself and get hold of myself here. So you gather and you sit down and you watch your mind running everywhere. And so you struggle to come to one-pointedness, to come to where you are actually collected. And many times that's where the practice stays for individuals who have not shifted their understanding. Because philosophically they still insist upon this ego as being the self that needs control. Right? So then you're caught in the struggle of contraction, 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 and you can't come to the second phase of meditation, which is much more interesting and enjoyable, which is actually the state of meditative awareness, which requires no effort. The mind is held in one point, but there's a panoramic vista. It's like, okay, you come together and open. So the first phase is the struggle phase. And because of either emotional immaturity and subconscious denial around the emotional circumstances and bad philosophical understanding, one is caught where they are. So they're just struggling with their ego all of the time. So those other two things need to be tended to. One is, have you done your emotional work if you have to? Not everyone has to do shadow work. I did. But not everyone does. But so if you've changed your mind and you're emotionally mature, then you'll move along. If you're not, you're going to be stuck wherever you're blocked intellectually or emotionally. And so the reason that the school that I founded, the Hollow Bones Zen School, we deal with that at the front end. It's like if you come into the school, we say, okay, what is your philosophical understanding? What is the articulation? And feed it back. What is your meditation? How are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And have you done your emotional work? Okay? Have you done your philosophical work? What is your understanding? What is your understanding? So that that's not in the way. And for me personally, I found it, I did serious meditation for well over a decade, caught with the concentration struggle and the big struggle with the ego. Just so it's personally. And then I was the head monk and vice abbot in a monastery for 6 years. I trained there 13. And over that period of time, I saw the same problem in myself and in other students. Well, why, after 7 or 8 or 10 years of serious meditation practice, are not these folks any more enlightened than the fellow that's serving me a McDonald's burger? Right? So it's like, what's wrong with this formula? And so I came back and said, no, we have to really look at our understanding of practice, from a very, very different way.
What about having a particular emotion, and you said change your mind. Now, is that are you trying to avoid struggle and trying to change from sadness to happiness?
No.
Or you do struggle?
What you want to do is understand the true nature of the feeling. Right? If you get caught in the emoting pattern in the feeling, you don't get to the nature of the feeling. Sadness has information for you. Something happened. What happened? If your friend has died or something has happened, you may need to grieve. Right? So it's truly having the feeling in its deepest sense and understanding the feeling, and then doing what follows from the feeling.
So is it sort of an embrace of the particular emotion?
It's to allow the circuit to happen. It's like the old circuit for me was feel, contract, emote. That was it. Feel, contract, emote. And in certain situations, like with anger, if I feel, contract, and go into the anger, I don't get the feeling underneath it. For me, always under anger was some kind of sadness or some kind of fear or some kind of vulnerability that I really needed to feel so that I could respond correctly. The contraction and the reaction prevented the depth of the feeling to inform me so that I could move intelligently in my life.
Where did the name Hollow Bones come from, and what is the origin of that?
In 1999, I started working with an international men's group called the Mankind Project. And so we had our first 7-day retreat. And at that, we decided that we were looking for a name. And so in the Lakota Indian tradition, it is suggested in order to be a true vehicle for spirit in the world, you need to be like a hollow bone. And so the hollow bone at its center is completely empty. And in Zen, the idea is that your spirit at its core is completely empty. So it's just a really wonderful fit. So that name came through a man named Bill Kauth, who was one of the founders. And he said, why don't we call the retreat Hollow Bones? And so that's where the name came from. And it fits nicely with the play on words with Zen.
So you were talking about the old circuit. How about the new circuit?
So the old circuit, and we're all familiar with the old circuit because we're doing cleanup a lot. It's like something happens, I get angry and I act out. And then 2 days later I'm going, oh, damn, why did I do that? Or I say something cruel or stupid, in the react. So it's anger, contract, emote, right? Or fear, anger, run and get small, or get passive aggressive. Right? So that's the old model, and that's the conditioned model. That's what we were taught, that's what we saw our parents do and everything. Well, what if instead the new model is feel the contraction, release the contraction, and drop into awareness. Now the awareness I'm talking about is meditative awareness. It's awareness that's simply pure, present, and open. It's like no resistance, no fear, no hesitation, just openness or availability. So instead of contracting, you drop. And when you drop into the openness, the feeling has information. What is the feeling about? In the case of anger or fear, pay attention. What is this? What is the meaning of this? The feeling is seeking meaning and informing and understanding. So you take the feeling in and then you respond. So it used to be 3 steps: feel, contract, emote. Feel, contract, emote. And particularly around anger and fear, we're all familiar with that pattern. Many times in our lives, we see ourselves doing that. The meditative model, or this model, is feel the contraction, release the contraction, drop into awareness, get the message on the phone. You answer the phone. Instead of screaming the phone is ringing, you answer the phone, get the message, and then respond. And we say respond with concern, compassion, and care. Yes.
How did you find people reacted to you that knew you before? And people elicit responses from people. They try to make you angry, or they try to make you, upset. To see and try to elicit that with an emotion in that. How did people respond to you after you were gone? Did they still try to make you come to that?
Well, it's very interesting. If you start to practice this, so that you go, this sounds like a possibility. So the next time that anger, if I can see the anger, and then I can take a few breaths, right, and go, what's this about? And then lean in, right? Someone is being mean and attacking you, and you go, right? They do one of 2 or 3 things. Sometimes they'll escalate, right? And you watch them, they get noisier and bigger, and you get a little closer, right? What's this about, right? So they're trying to make it louder so that you'll get engaged, and you don't, and then they'll stop, and they'll just turn around and walk away, right? Because they don't want to stay with you because you've blown their cover, right? Or they'll stay and inquire. That's my experience. And I had an assistant at the monastery, and his job was to make me angry. I didn't give him the job. He just took it on, you know? And he could be so irritating. So one time, he was my editor, right? And I'd have to write an article for a newsletter or something, and I was a terrible writer. I'm actually finally improving, but so I wrote this article quickly, of course, sloppy and quick, because I don't write. It's just not my thing, so I did it and I handed it to him. And we were standing in the office, and he read it, and he went, and threw it in the garbage, threw it in the wastebasket, and I went, and I said, if you do that again, I'll squash you like a bug. And he threw up his hands and he was dancing around the office. Squash me like a bug, squash me like a bug. He said, got you. I finally got you. He said, I've been trying to get you angry for like 4 months. Right? But I was just cool, Mr. Cool, Mr. Cool. Finally, right? But that's having fun with it, both in the practice. So he was testing and finally. But so it becomes a wonderful game of it's like, what I would like to say is that our whole ego, our whole persona, our whole character is a figment of divine imagination, right? It's the story, at the center of it is the purity of your soul. And everything is a conditioned reality. So all of these precious little views and opinions and angers and fears and pettinesses are enormously amusing, right? And so once you start to develop the awareness and the ability then to come into a condition and watch how you respond and to choose other ways, you're actually playing with the recreation of your character. Right? But first, it's really good to understand that you are this deeper purity, and then philosophically realize that you can rewrite the whole story. We're rewriting it moment by moment. And if you do deep regressive therapy like I've done, I was amazed to find out a lot of the stuff that governed my life never even happened. It never happened. I went back to my family and my mother and discussed things. She said, well, that didn't happen. This happened. And I went, so it was not even true in the formative stage. So that then you can start working with the edges and the definition of your personality. Yes.
First part of our program here, where we meditated for 15 minutes or so. Do you have any physiological tricks or mechanics that we can use to get us into it quicker?
Into the state quicker? Someone just said practice. Good instruction is helpful. Absolute conviction and intention is another. Where you sit, right, and bam, right, you're going to do this, right? And there's nothing in your way except yourself. You're being asked to sit down and become perfectly still and completely open your heart and completely open your mind and completely open your spirit and move into the silence within yourself. The kingdom lies within you. What does that mean? So, so sit down. And then it's not, oh, well, that's not the practice. So the coming with that absolute intention and conviction for a short period of time, again and again and again. And it is always the same. It begins with a big struggle. And you're sitting down, oh, this is hard, I can't do this. And then over a period of time, it's like, you get a couple of glimpses, a couple of insights. So the insights that we're looking for are small and big. So the big ones are absolute silence. Absolute silence. So within the center of your being, there is absolute silence. Right? So if you go in, one thing that students will say, well, it's absolutely silent in here. And you say, yes, wonderful, back to the Zendo, right? And then another is like, There's no time. There's no time. There's never been any time. It's like now. There's never anything but now. There's no yesterday. There's no tomorrow. There's just now. You go, good, back to the meditation hall. Or integration. There's only one giant living being. There's only one giant living being. Wonderful. Back to the Zendo. Right? Or I choose my emotions. Right? Good. Back to the Zendo. There isn't any death. Good. Back to the Zendo. And so these insights that come. So, and at first it's always the same. How do I do this? I'm not getting anywhere. It's like struggle. It's painful. It's fine. Stay the course. Just keep practicing. Right? And trusting completely as an article of faith that the kingdom lies within you. And don't be content. Like some students, I'll say, how's it going? Oh, pretty good. My meditation's all right these days. And I just want to slap them around, right? I say, you've got a handful of copper coins screaming gold, gold. I've got gold, right? Because I'm not neurotically bound so much anymore. But have you tasted eternal silence? Right? Have you gone beyond life and death? Do you know from realization the essence of your spirit or your being? Don't be content with just a little quiescence or stillness. Go deeper and deeper into yourself. So know that the great teachers in all of the traditions, the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the Hindu tradition, the shamanic traditions, they did not lie. Know that. They did not lie. All of them did not leave a whole bunch of lies behind, right? They weren't all charlatans. And they were no different than you or I. So it is within you if you'll pay the price. Anything else? Yes.
I'm starting to have the feeling that it would be possible to live in an apartment by the L in Chicago and be able to do meditation, and that the external stimuli is just simply part of life, part of meditation. Do you just observe it and go on? I'm talking
Yes.
about noise that really is external.
Yes.
But could become, well, I guess it would only become internal if your emotion was triggered by it.
No, that's a good insight. It's like, this is not quiescence. This is not denial of noise or feeling. It's like in Zen we say, what's the best way to control a big raging bull? Pardon? Avoid it. But in a sense. But we say the best way is to give it a huge pasture to roam around in. So also another insight in your deep meditation is like vastness. This mind contains the universe. You go, good, back to the Zendo. So it at least contains a little noise of an L going by in Chicago. It's like, you grin, right? And it goes this way. But you never have been disturbed. Your deep mind has never been disturbed by anything. It can't be disturbed. You could say that it has one thing. If it said one thing, it would be yes. 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 Next. Yes. Next. So that depth then, so when you come to that depth, anything that's there is simply arising and disappearing.
I had a very brief dialogue with the beginning tonight, kick off on a word we used. It wasn't lengthy, it was just, well, what came up was that I've always said, well, for a couple of years I've been saying your perception is your truth. And tonight it was, is my perception my truth? Because of this, all these old messages that I've lived by and I'm now finding consume a very great deal of negative energy and expand it out. And those were my perceptions, but they were based on faulty perceptions. So in that regard, my perception has not been my truth.
Yeah, your perception is a relative truth. Your perception is a relative truth. So there's a problem when the ego that value weights things. Our egos are value weighting. It's a value weighting mechanism. Likes this, doesn't like that, likes this, divides it all up. So, yeah. So that's an interpretation or a conceptualization. There is, another is when, if you'll enter into profound stillness and look from this depth, everything is beautiful beyond description. It's like people start weeping because they can see suddenly. And so that's perception from purity. There's no opinion, there's no view. It's just you're looking at the truth, not your conceptualization of it or interpretation. It's another level of insight that we look for. And so that, then you see through your perception, and then you see that those relative circumstances are just interesting interpretations and views, but they lose their validity and they lose their hold. Because then you realize that your whole story is a relative interpretation based on a self-referenced position. Wonderful Zen saying, no matter how interesting and wonderful a thing might be to say, better to shut up. So my job is to entertain you, to challenge you, and my prayer is that you will practice more, or come to practice. Our culture is painfully insane, and our environment around us is disappearing. And we suffer deeply from three poisons: denial, cynicism, and hypocrisy. We deny what's going on in the world and continue our lives as they are, as if that's not happening. What can I do follows. I'm just one person. So we become cynics. So denial doesn't free us or separate us from the truth of the necessity to awaken and change our lives. Cynicism, what can I do, doesn't separate us from the truth of our necessity to awaken and change our lives. And hypocrisy, oh, we're cool. It's okay the way it is. Doesn't separate us from the truth of the karmic relationships that we have. So it's essential that we awaken, more important than ever before. And there is a way to awaken. Sit down, become perfectly still, and look within. Be still, be silent, and know that I am God. Be still, be silent, and know. Be still. Be. So first take your seat and turn your vision within and do not look away. One of my favorite Zen teachers lived in, I think it was the 5th or 6th century. He was called Bodhi Dharma. His Chinese name was Pu Ti Ta Myo. And they said he was 6'6" with a big red beard and blue eyes. I'm sure he was an Irishman. Somehow he found his way to India, and he brought this tradition, Zen tradition. He's one of I'm the 83rd patriarch in my line. And he was the 28th patriarch in my line. And said he cut off his eyelids so he could not look away, so that he could not deny himself any longer. He couldn't close his eyes. The myth is he cut off his eyelids and threw them out the windows so that he could sit fiercely. And sometimes you'll see these Zen drawings of this big guy, bald guy with eyeballs like this. That's him. His eyeballs are like this because he doesn't have any eyelids. And when he threw the eyelids outside, they grew and became the tea plant. And so one of the rules in my tradition, I'm from Samurais Shaolin Tradition, is that we must drink a lot of tea to stay awake in our meditation. And so that pointed me in a direction about the necessity to practice with great intention. And so like Bodhi Dharma, if you've had enough, right, and you want to know yourself and to awaken yourself and awaken your world and come to great ease and comfort in your life, then first begin deep contemplative meditative practice, not supplicant practice, not devotional practice, but fierce introspective practice, no matter what your tradition. And if you're doing that in this way, you can call it Zen, because we don't care what you call it, or what your belief system might or might not be. We care about your awakening. So, take special care of yourself. Thank you so much for coming. And should you want a good place to sit or practice, there are a few in the neighborhood.